get your shit together and like be an adult and like buy basic things for yourself. Like that's one thing like I've never been that good at like just like basic self-care, like just like doing things like being a responsible human, like buying a bed, like getting sheets, like I don't know, I just like cuz I just haven't been that good at that. So I think that's sort of like being out here and like having my own spot. It's like sort of forced me to be an adult. Like now that I'm 26, almost 27, finally like figuring it out, I guess.
Yeah, man, I can relate. I don't know if it's like, I mean, I narcissistically want to say that like us as artists or creatives tend to be kind of like that, but I don't know if this is just like something that everybody struggles with, but I'm the same way. Like there's like certain things that like I just keep missing jury duty, and I got an email today and they're like there's like going to be like a warrant out for your
Yeah.
arrest if you
Yeah.
like don't go to the courthouse, and I just like can't be bothered to. But
No,
yeah,
it's
adulting, man.
I'm the same. Like I'll get like a water bill or something, and I'm just like, I just won't like. It's like I just don't want to do it. It'll take me like 5 minutes, and I'm just like, I really just don't want to do this at all. And
Right.
like my mom will literally text me like, did you pay your utilities this month? She's like 3,000 miles away. I'm like, not yet, but I'll get to it. Don't worry. Like
Right.
after they're due. Like yeah, it's just funny. I think it is something about like more creative people, like just sort of like they're not as like because I've never been the type of person that like just like makes lists and then like sort of bangs out everything on the list and like is like super structured. I'm just like sort of just do whatever the hell I feel like doing like from day to day. So it's been working pretty well so far, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, that's actually interesting because I think that's it's cool to hear you say that, because I think that's something that like when if you read books about productivity or like you if you listen to a lot of podcasts, like
Uh,
you kind of get conflicting advice on that. Like some people say what you said,
yeah,
and both like there's successful people on both sides who are like I can't follow a routine, and then other people are like I have to show up at the same time every day. And I
yeah,
think it's nice to know that both can work. You just got to like know yourself.
yeah. My thing about like I always try to like never force myself to do anything like at all. Like it's weird because like and maybe I am like legitimately just like lazy and like undisciplined. Like I'm not saying this strategy is like the highest tier strategy, but like people that are like I meditate every day, I journal every day, like I run every day. I'm just like, why? Like if it for me, if it feels like effort, I don't do it. Like if it feels like I'm forcing myself to do something, I just don't do it because I'm very like sort of like Taoist and like sort of just like just do what I feel like doing like as much as possible. And so for me, it's like if you're forcing yourself to do something, the energy behind that is like I'm not good enough unless I do this thing. Like I have to do this thing. Like let me cram myself into this like way of being. But I also know like for some people I guess like that's what works. And also I'm like I don't have it figured out. Like my life isn't perfect, so maybe I do need like a little more discipline. And maybe like nah, it's just not my style to do stuff like that. But you're definitely right. There's definitely people on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's it's like there's this story that we're told about success, which is that like you got to work hard, which I don't think I'm not saying that either of us are saying that you don't need to work hard
Yeah.
right now, but it's more like you got to like struggle, right? Like there's like whatever you do, like I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Manson,
Yeah.
but like he's a great like I really like his stuff, and he had an article a while back where he was like you got to choose your shit sandwich,
Yeah.
like because
I've read that.
yeah, like everything's gonna come with its share of like shit that you don't want to do. So I guess yeah, like how has that been for you? Because I mean, over the past couple of years, things have picked up so much for you, and like I know that you've been now you're in LA. Like I'm sure you're working with a lot of people. Probably have a busier schedule than you did like a few years ago in terms of like writing sessions and stuff. Like how, given what you said about like only doing things that you want to do, like uh yeah, how has that changed for you? Like do you find yourself have adopting any strategies to like get yourself into the mood if you're not necessarily feeling it because like you have something scheduled, for example?
Yeah. Well, for the most part, like for example, with sessions, like writing sessions, for anybody listening that doesn't know, I'm a songwriter, and so like basically the way it works is like I either write songs myself or sometimes I'll go to the studio with another person and write, and that's called a session. And um, I only do like probably two sessions a week, which is not that much to be honest, like compared to what some other, especially because I'm an artist, and so if I was like just a writer, I'd probably be doing more sessions because I'd be trying to pitch songs and like get them placed with other artists and stuff. But since I'm an artist and a writer too, and because I sort of write a lot of my own stuff anyways, I've probably only been doing like one or two sessions a week. So for me, any of the sessions I'm doing, there's usually it's not the case that I will feel like um oh, I really don't want to do this session, because it's like because I honestly try to keep my schedule pretty open, because I spend a lot of time just like meditating or like just going to the beach, like or just like walking, like because that's like what I like to do. um so I haven't had too much trouble. Like, I mean, if I have a session that I really don't want to do, I'll just cancel it, to be honest. um but yeah, in terms of like, I guess there is always stuff you don't want to do, right? But what I've realized is like, especially as an artist, like getting to where I've gotten, like I think it's really important to for me to like to realize, I realized a while ago, the thing that I'm the best at is writing and singing songs. And everything else, like there's so many steps in like in being an artist, like, you know, there's like well, there's so many art steps in just making a song, like, as you know, like, you know, there's the arrangement, there's the production, there's the mixing, there's the mastering, there's the like there's all these different things. And um I, when I started music, was obsessed with like making the perfect song and like doing all those things right, and like just trying to just like do the whole thing. And what I realized is like no one's doing that. Like no one is like making a perfect record from start to finish. Like you got to find your lane and then stick in it. And so like for me, what I realized, my lane is like it's very much on the like the writing side and the singing side. Now, it's funny because I got into the game doing production, and I still like to do production a little bit, but not nearly as much as I used to. But I just realized, to keep myself sane, I should put my money on the thing I'm strongest at, which is just writing songs. So what I do is I write the songs and I record them, and then I just give them to other producers most of the time. Now I you know, work with the producers to like give them, you know, feedback and stuff like that, on like sort of the direction I want. And sometimes I'll do additional production or whatever. But um, I guess that's one thing I realize is like you have to sort of know your lane and just do that thing, and stop trying to like overextend yourself, because you'll find that whatever that thing is that you're really good at, you sort of attract the people that like will compliment you anyways. And like all the successful people in the world are sort of leveraging their own skill sets, like with the help of other people. Like nobody's like doing everything by themselves anyways. So that's like a really important concept I've learned recently, is like you just have to find the thing you're good at and then like sort of go all in on it, and get other people to do the rest, which is tricky at first if you don't have the resources, right? Like in the beginning, you do have to like mix the song yourself, you do have to master the song yourself, you do have to do the production yourself. And maybe that's just like part of the hustle or whatever. It's like trying to get like, because it's really hard in the beginning, like, you know, if you're just a songwriter and you don't have any of those other skills, maybe it's hard to record the song and put it out and get a following or whatever. But now that I've gotten to this place, it's like, okay, I have like a good knowledge of all that other stuff, but like I'm not gonna waste my time on the other stuff. And then, like you said, the shit sandwich, it becomes like very minute in a lot of ways. If the more niche you become, like, yes, there's still stuff I don't like doing, like you know, I comping vocals is not my favorite, or like, you know, like there's still nitty gritty stuff I don't like to do. But it's like once you hone in on that thing you really really like, it becomes a lot easier.
Man, yeah, I think that's so important for, I mean, definitely for artists to hear. But, and by the way, at the beginning of the, like before the podcast airs, I'll do like a description of you and like, you know, put all your stuff in the show notes and stuff, like an intro. But yeah, man, I think it's so good to hear, especially from someone like yourself that, you know, has really seen some like real success in the last 2 years, the last few years, like for anyone to just find that thing. And I want to take it back because for people who don't know, so we met actually, we were part of the same production course, Hyperbits Masterclass, shout out Hyperbits. a legendary dude in class, and we took this course, and it was at the time it was like 2017, you know, and we just knew each other. What's that?
It's 2016 actually. It was my
Oh
junior
yeah, yeah, you're right.
or
Yeah,
like for me in college.
yeah, 2016. Yeah, that's right. Because I was in business school actually at the time, and I remember like we were taking this class. It was a bunch of electronic producers,
Yeah,
and specifically like within electronic music, I feel like it was like a lot of like future bass, like pop, like kind of stuff. So like melodic house was really big at the time. And I remember like you were producing under your name, Anson,
yeah,
and you had some remixes on SoundCloud that had done pretty well, like
yeah,
sort of like bootleg remixes.
yeah,
And we took this class and it was great. And then we kind of were just like chatting. And I remember talking to you over Skype, I think like 3 years ago after we had finished the class.
yeah,
And I remember you were still working as a software engineer, and like you were kind of expressing how you wanted to go more into the songwriting lane.
yeah,
And like man, like as your friend, it's just so inspiring to have that memory and then be talking to you now, because like I just remember you were being really vulnerable like you always are, and you were like, yeah man, like I want to do this, and like there's so many producers out there, and I feel like this is the way I can differentiate myself.
yeah,
And here we are now, and it worked out so well. um and so I guess I'm curious, like that idea of finding your lane is such golden advice. What was that process like for you, going from a like being a producer, which you still are, you still have those skills like you said, but then really being able to divorce yourself? And I can imagine it would almost feel like, you know, a part of you is kind of like not dying, but you're like, okay, I'm gonna just focus on this now. Was like, what was that like? I think you took classes at Berkeley online.
yeah.
But yeah, talk to us about what that was like, because I think that's such an inspiring and like important thing for people to hear.
Yeah, I did take a few classes from Berkeley online, and those were really helpful. Like just because my mom actually had set aside some money for education purposes when I was younger, and like I ended up getting a lot. Like this sounds like a flex, but like I got a lot of scholarships to school, so we didn't need the money. But then she still had the like this education money sitting around, so we ended up um taking some music courses online. And like what I took like this songwriting class, and every week we would write a song and like post it for the teacher, and like we'd get feedback from the other students in the class. And like I was just getting really good feedback. And also, excuse me, um I was like listening to the other students' songs like versus the songs I was writing, and I was like I sort of realized like I might be a little better than this at this than like the average person like that I thought I was, like not to like sound like pretentious or anything, but like I just realized like I'm pretty good at this. Like and the teacher was like, you know, obviously like, well, not obviously, but she was saying like,
Clearly, she was
yeah,
just
clearly like
blown
I
away.
as my like genius right away. um but no, I was just getting great feedback, and so I was like, okay. And it's like you said, one thing I realized too is like there's so many people like making beats and like making remixes and stuff like that. Like there's so many people like in that lane. And not only that, but there's so many people that are amazing producers. Like just and the thing that people don't realize about music production is like it is so hard, bro. Like to be the best, to be in the top tier, to it you don't even understand like how like the level of like you have to have such a deep technical knowledge, but then your ear has to also be so refined to create the soundscape that's cohesive, and like your taste has to be like, you know, you have to listen to so many records to like know what works and what doesn't work. And you have to actually be like a musician, like you have to have like music knowledge, like of the feel and the vibe and like the theory and stuff like that. I mean, it takes years and years and years and years. I mean, I've been producing for 6 or 7 years now, and I'm still like just feel like a complete novice like compared to a lot of people I work with. So anyways, what I realize is like, okay, it's really hard to break in the producer game. Not only that, but like it's like really brutal, like just like that the whole game of being a producer out in LA, like trying to get cuts, like which is funny because I want to be a writer, which is like arguably even probably harder than being a producer, but it's like it's a whole thing. And so but what I kind of realized is like, okay, I might be better at writing than I am at producing. because I've always been like a really good writer, like just not even with songs, like just in general. Like I always got good grades in my English class, and like I've always like felt like I was just a really strong writer. I wrote the commencement speech for my high school graduation. I like won the district poetry contest in high school. Like so, I'm a pretty good writer, and so but I had never tried to like write songs. But I also had a lot of experience like writing melodies and stuff because like when I was in the jazz band, I would do solos and like improvise and stuff. So there's a lot of just sort of intuitive abilities there. But yeah, so I sort of just put those two together like and started writing songs and stuff. And I think another thing too is I sort of realized like I had like an interesting sounding voice. Like people had told me before they like sort of like the timbre of my voice. So I thought maybe that could help like set me apart or whatever. But in terms of like, yeah, like the transition, like from being a producer, it's funny because like it just sort of happens, like as you go. Because now when I started producing, I had such an ambition to you probably felt the same, like to just learn everything and like to really try and be the best and like and hustle and like I was really in this headspace where I was like just I can do it. Like I just was so focused.
Yep.
And then I think I just hit a certain point where like I had been doing it for so long. I guess it kind of burnt out, to be honest, on producing. Like I just like it didn't feel the same. And even now it doesn't feel the same when I sit down to make a track. I sort of lost that. But I don't think it's because like I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's just sort of life's way of saying like, okay, maybe it's time to try something else. So like that's like kind of how I sort of just got into the songwriting thing. And yeah, I don't know, but it's funny too because like I look back on all the songs I wrote and posted because like I put out an EP called "Songs I Wrote in My Bedroom" in 2020, and that's like a bunch, probably 20. Well, it's not really an EP technically. I mean, it's
That's
technically
a
an EP,
long EP.
a long EP. I know.
Right.
Anyways, it's like 20 songs, and I always like look back on those songs and I think like, why did I write those? Like that was a lot of effort. Like that was a lot of um why did I do that? And I don't know why I did it. Like I don't know why I did it. I was just like I guess I just wanted to, and like um it just felt right in the moment. I really don't know. But that's all I could say about being a writer is like it sort of it always felt right in a way, and it felt like, well, to be honest, it felt like it was I didn't want to be a software engineer anymore, and like um I needed some way to make money, which is so funny because like there's a million other ways you could make money probably besides being like a songwriter. That's like definitely doesn't seem like at the top of the list. But at the time I just didn't really want to get a real job, so I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm just going to post songs on YouTube and maybe I can make some money from the ad revenue on YouTube, and it ended up working. But yeah, I don't know what like exactly what the transition was like. Like I said, it was just pretty organic, and like looking back, uh, everything sort of fell into place. So I'm not sure. People always ask me for advice, and I don't have great advice except for like you have to be good at what you do, and you have to love what you do, and you have to see where life takes you. I don't know.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I think, yeah, it's always tricky to give or receive advice in a field like music that is so not like regulated. Like it's not like, it's like if someone wants to be a doctor, it's like you can like tell them what to do to become a doctor, or even a software engineer, probably for that degree. It's like study this, like, but I think with music, it's just so different and it's so subjective. And like the actual product, if we want to call it that, especially if you're an artist, I feel like it's such an extension of your soul and your personality and your ability to listen. And I think one thing you said that I think actually is a really practical piece of advice that I kind of want to drill into is like listening to the universe, like giving you that sign and being like, yo, maybe like the #producer grind like isn't the vibe for me anymore because I'm just like not feeling inspired.
Yeah.
And I think like, yeah, I mean, because I know we've talked a lot about like meditation, and I know we both are like into all these different things. And like, I think it can be hard sometimes for people to really find that intuitive voice, whether you want to call it the universe or your soul or your deeper wisdom or knowing, and be able to differentiate, like, am I giving up too early? Or am I being delusional, like, and thinking that like this is like gonna work when it's not? Or like, is that voice actually true, especially with all the stimulus coming in, So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like in your case, was that ever a challenge for you? Like, was there doubt in listening to that voice, or was it just like loud and clear? Like,
No, no, there's never any doubt. Okay, no. That sounds really maybe pretentious, but like I have known for like since I started, I'm- I just knew. Like I knew I could do it. Like I knew from this like from when I started. I think I have always been blessed with this like if I look back on my life when when I started music, there has never this you know what? I'm just going to say it. I don't care
could
if it's
say it, yeah.
there has never been something that I have tried to do that I have set an intention for that I have not been able to do in my life. I have always achieved the things I wanted. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that I am I'm very smart. I would this is so funny because okay, I'm going to caveat this by saying I feel like we live in a culture that does not like let you like it's like not cool to brag about yourself.
Dude,
But
please, this is like so important for people to hear. Yeah.
just I just want to explain to people so they have context. I have always been a very smart person. I got straight A's through high school. I got pretty much straight A's through college. I've always been a good communicator. So I have always had a very strong confidence in myself, in my ability to function in the world and to do the things that I don't think I'm better than anybody else. I just think I have a track record of doing the things I want. So when I started doing music, and I've also had a track record of being a talented musician. You know, I got awards in high school for being a musician. So I was like, you know what, I can do this, and it felt like this was my calling, although I didn't realize it at the time. So for me personally, I didn't I didn't have that much. I did have some. Obviously, when you're like sort of um, you know, you know, the music industry is a deeply intimidating place, especially when you sort of start from the outside and then you're sort of rubbing shoulders with all these really famous people, like super successful people. Like, yeah, you're gonna feel like, okay, I'm just this small fry from the Midwest or whatever. That like, who am I to think I can do this? But generally speaking, I have always sort of had this knowing, like I must go in this direction, like, and the idea that I should give up is so hilarious to me. It's like that's such an egoic idea. Like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, oh, first of all, I think the idea that anyone is like a failure or something is like it's so egoic, like inherently. Like, oh, like
Yeah.
imagine. I don't know. It just feels like you're just like I don't know. It just feels like you're sort of wanting more attention. Like, oh, I'm
Like
so
almost like masturbatory, like,
yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
like it's
self-flagellating.
yeah. I don't know. Like imagine thinking you were so important that you were
Right.
like that your little tiny narrative like was better or worse than what was happening like in the scheme of the whole or whatever. Anyways, um so to be honest, the it's honestly not even that I didn't have doubt. I was just so I guess I think a better way of putting it was like I was so interested in what I was doing and just so willing to like I would literally pay money to write songs and produce songs. You probably would too. Like it's just so much fun. Like
Right.
I don't give a like I don't care if it like if my song gets 100 streams or a million streams. I mean now I do, but like when I started, I was just like I was just making stuff like that was just fun. And so like that has been like my prerogative from the beginning. Like in the beginning, like yes, I wanted to be successful, but that was such a vague idea in my mind. It wasn't like when I put out my first track in 2015, I was like, "All right, where's the record deal? Like when's it happening?" I was
Right.
like, I was just like seeing what happened. I was just like putting stuff out. And like that's been like my thing for the whole like literally for the whole time even now like that I have like a lot of success. Like I'm just happy that any of it happened. So like I've never thought like, oh, maybe I should give up. Like maybe this isn't working or whatever. I guess it helps too that like I actually did have some success early on. Like you said, like I posted some remixes that did really well. And so I
Right.
sort of knew out the jump that like I probably had, I was doing better than like maybe some other people. But in terms of what you said about like following, and this is why I feel like also as I've gone on, I've sort of honed in on my ability to sort of like you said trust that inner knowing and like sort of listen to the universe. And I feel like we're all doing that in our own way, whether or not we're like um calling it that, or because it's so funny, because like I had like over the past couple years I've had this deep spiritual awakening, to the point where I like sort of like I'm always connected with my higher self, like feel very whole and all this stuff. And I just look back at my life, like probably before like 2 or 3 years ago. I'm like, dude, how was I even alive? Like I was so asleep, I was so unconscious and so neurotic. Like I just wonder how I made anything happen in my life, because I was just sort of bumbling around like a chicken with its head cut off. Like, and this is how like 99% of people live their life, is just like, just completely in their heads, like just like doing whatever the hell their like animal reptilian brain wants them to do.
Mm.
But anyways, yeah, it is super important to like to hone in on that. And only you, the listener of this podcast, can be the one who can differentiate between, you know, um, that voice in your head that says you should give up because you're a failure at or you should keep going. But I will say, usually, if the voice in your head is saying you're a failure, that's not you. That's your true self, your high self would never say you're a failure. That's probably the voice of someone you learned some negative beliefs about yourself. Um,
Yeah.
but it's definitely true, like you said, that the universe is always showing you where to go. And I did not realize the extent of the truth of this until, like, I'm still learning it. Like, because it's amazing
Yeah.
when you actually, because it's have you read The Alchemist?
Mhm. Yeah.
I need to reread it, because like I read it a while ago. I actually didn't finish it. I almost finished it. But this book, I understand now why it's like the best-selling book of all time. Like literally, it's like just been on like the number one list for like 30 years or something. It, because it's true. Like it's literally true. Like your life is trying to live itself through you, and it is trying to take the path of least resistance into like like peace, basically. And like, so nobody is actually like, it seems too simple, right? Like it seems too simple, like oh, like, because what I say is like, if there's friction in your life, or if it feels like there's friction, it means you're probably not going the right way. Because like if you look at life, if you look at nature, everything takes the path of least resistance, and it all works out. So you in your human life should try and do the same thing. And if there's friction, it means don't do it. It's funny, because I was just like dating someone, or not really dating, but I was sort of talking to this person, and um I sort of felt like some friction, but I like sort of went for it anyway, like because like my ego got attached, and like it didn't work. Of course, it didn't work, and it caused me a lot of pain, actually.
Right.
And I knew like the moment we started talking, I had this feeling in my gut, like this is not going to work. This person is not right for you, and I felt that friction, and I went for it anyway. It was a great lesson on you have to not go for those things that you're feeling friction for. But yeah, it's so true. But life, sometimes you just need time, like to make those mistakes, and then like sort of realize like, okay, I'm gonna start listening now, because I'm getting my ass beat by the universe. And that's what happened to me, is like, if you get your ass beat by the universe long enough, eventually, hopefully, you will let go and start changing something, which is basically what happened to me.
Dude, I mean, yeah, just so much of what you said is so important. And I think it's just like, I think what you said about like feeling like a victim, or feeling like you're a failure, for example, being actually like a very egotistical, and I would even say narcissistic thought,
Yeah.
is so important, because like you're still just making it all about you, right?
Exactly.
And
It's
it's
like,
like,
oh, I'm a failure.
yeah, it's like, God, like, woe is me, like I'm so like, I can't believe that like it's not happening. And that's where the comparison comes from. I think one thing that you said that was so, and you kind of said it in passing, but it stuck with me, it was like when you started realizing like, damn, I'm actually like really good at this. It wasn't, the thought was I'm good at this, it wasn't I'm better at this than all these other
Right.
fucking songwriters
Right.
that suck.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that's the other side of it, that's so ego based. But instead it's like, no, like nature or life or God or whatever anyone wants to call it is like trying to bring this through me, and I'm just like this vessel. And like whatever my ego thinks it could want or not want is pales in comparison to the force of that thing. And it's like, it kind of reminds me of like, I feel like life is like this river that's
Yeah.
flowing in one direction, and we're all on these little rafts,
Yeah.
and we can like, it's our job to basically like not crash into rocks. Like
Exactly.
as we're going down the river, it's like we're just like moving to the side. But the moment you try to go up the river or like across the river or get off the river and go to another river, like that's when you run into problems. And I think it's a very humbling experience. And I want to talk about your, if you want to talk about it, I want to talk about your spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Like, because I've also, I've also been on a spiritual path, and that, in many ways, that's kind of what this podcast is about. I'll just say this because the first episode, like, I want to talk to people who are like successful by like world, measures or whatever, but I want to talk to them about like what's underneath that, because I think there are like some things that are just not, we're not really taught. Like, for example, even the paradigm of like, one thing you said, like you said that, I think you said, if there's friction, like you're probably going the wrong way.
Yeah.
That is like, so that I feel like so much of the hustle culture,
completely
like,
contrary
it's
to
completely
everything.
contrary to that. And like, what would it be like to wake up one day and just give yourself permission to only do the things that felt easy, inspiring, wholesome, beneficial? It's like, that's so like, especially in our culture, in American, I think like this is like capitalist countries in general, because I don't feel this as much in like Europe, or like I was just in Peru last week.
Right. They just take naps like at random times during the day.
They're just like chilling. And it's like, I was in Peru last week doing plant medicine, and I just got my ego completely fucking destroyed.
Nice.
Like I was in the Amazon river jungle, like walking through the jungle. There's like all these other animals. No one gives a fuck about any of my goals. Like, it's just so insignificant. And yeah, man, I think it's so important to kind of start putting that information out there. And I think it is changing. Like, but just to that idea that if you're experiencing friction, like you're going in the wrong direction,
Yeah, well, friction. Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned the river thing, and I just saw an Alan Watts quote that was like basically that exact thing. Is like life, like we are, basically a river of energy. Because like on the deepest level, you don't exist at all. You literally don't exist. Like you are literally nothing. Like, so it's very hard to explain, and I haven't really. I've sort of danced around this idea in my meditations, and I've heard other people explain it. I haven't quite like grasped it fully in my consciousness, but like I've definitely gotten to a very still place in meditation where I'm just sort of open and watching, and I'm like, oh, there's nothing here. Like there's no one here. Like there's literally like there are thoughts, but they have no attachment to anything. Like that, the only thing that exists is consciousness itself unwinding over and over and over again. So like there's nothing, there's no you, and the pain is caused by your physical being grabbing on to ideas or like about yourself, or like narratives or whatever. Most of it's just trauma, honestly, because what you find is like and trauma is like a big part of why my spiritual awakening. Most human beings are so unbelievably traumatized that they they they're just in survival mode all the time. But I'm sure there was a time. This is what I always wonder, because now the world is so traumatized, and you can see it when you work through your own trauma. Everyone is walking around like a chicken with their head cut off. Like it's just everyone's afraid they're going to lose their job. That's why everyone's hustling, because the society we live in is so actually built on fear. It's really not good. But I just wonder, like, and moving through my own trauma, it's like, okay, how did this happen? Like, because like as you come back to your true self and your true state of being, it's so perfect and so seamless. You just think like, how did this? It would have taken an enormous amount of effort to disrupt this, not only to disrupt this in one being, but then to pass it on to so many different beings. So I always wonder, like, how humanity got so traumatized in the first place.
Well, I think man. I mean, I think it's generational, right? Like, and it's
yeah,
like,
it goes back a long way. Wars and
dude,
all these things.
it's crazy, man. And like, I'm gonna get a little woo woo for a second because I feel like the moment is calling for it. Like, so something that I experience regularly, like, I mean, I have a handle on it because I meditate a lot and I do all these different practices, but I'll just get these like fucking jolts of anxiety, and I'm like, where the fuck is this coming from? Like, I'm living in a first world country. I'm like extremely comfortable. Like there's nothing wrong. There's nothing to be anxious about. And something that have recently started to discover through my plant medicine work and through meditations is like, dude, my grandfather was in colonialized India.
Yeah.
Like he was in jail, but he literally got put in jail by the British and like was getting persecuted. That's 2 generations away. I never even met him because he passed away before I was born, but like that's in my DNA. Like that's like scientifically proven to be in my DNA. And I think like that's where it's like these survival impulses that we all have as humans, like the reptilian brain or whatever you want to call it, that has played out in years of war and trauma and abuse and all this toxicity. And now we're starting to wake up. But you're right, man. It's the whole society and culture is built off of it. And I think it really takes either like a rock bottom experience where you're just like, okay, like I need to just like come out of this, or if you're lucky, like a super pleasurable, like wonderful experience, which can also happen, to just wake up and then have an experience that you never forget. And then, like you said, you start walking around and you're like, oh yeah, like I can see this person is just like projecting all this shit onto me. And
Yeah.
I think that projection is happening at a macro level in society too.
Oh yeah.
And it's, as artists too, I mean, I want to talk more about music too, like because your songwriting, I think it's very vulnerable, right? And it's very authentic, and like even your voice and the timbre of your voice. And I nerdily, as a fellow music maker, have like a more of like a process oriented question about like your takes and stuff we can get to later. But like I think as artists, we're so sensitive, right? So we're, if anything, like even more susceptible to this toxicity. And it's really like up to us to keep that channel pure, because that sensitivity, it's a double-edged sword. Like it can drive you into like fucking mental illness and addiction, but it's also like your greatest ally. And I don't know, like, do you feel that way with yourself in terms of your songwriting and being able to tap into such a vulnerable place?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm like, you're talking to like the most sensitive person on earth. Like, I didn't realize how sensitive was until like shit really started hitting the fan, and then I sort of had to figure out why the fuck I felt so bad all the time, and there were so many different layers I had to peel back in terms of my emotional health and my physical health. Like, first of all, like I had to radically change like almost everything about my lifestyle to feel better. Like when I started really hitting the fan back in probably 2017. Like for example, I only drink spring water now. I don't ever drink tap water because I feel horrible when I drink tap water. I don't know if you've done any research on what's in tap water in the average, especially here in LA. It's horrible. It's like they've got like heavy metals and pharmaceuticals and stuff. It's really, really bad. And even if I take a shower for too long, my skin is so sensitive. It's like I feel really bad. I'm very chemically sensitive. I'm very sensitive to like strong scents and perfumes and stuff like that. Bright lights. Like I'm a very, very sensitive person. And so like now my diet is like very, very clean. Like I very rarely eat processed foods. Like I'm just rocking. It's taken me a very long time actually to figure out what to eat. This was like I couldn't figure out for a very long time. I was just having like weird digestive stuff and like sort of chronic fatigue all the time. And actually use this technique called muscle testing. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like
Yeah.
kinesiology.
Yeah, it's like David Hawkins, I think.
Yeah, David Hawkins talks a lot
Yeah,
about it.
letting go.
It works
Yeah.
really well. In fact, actually, muscle testing, I don't just use for food. I use it for any. I have this very simple methodology where you could either do it like this, and you just sort of make this like you ask your like you say like, okay, my name is Anson, like, okay, that's true, like my name is Bob, like that's false, like it sounds too simple to be true, but if you actually spend some time with it, you can develop quite a finesse. And like your body is always sort of in touch with like the sort of greater intelligence, like the infinite field, if you will. So you can
Right.
ask literally any question and get a yes or no. It's very powerful.
Mm.
But anyways, so yeah, I was super sensitive, and I, yeah, for better or for worse, have had the pleasure of like dealing with a lot of stuff and writing about it, I think. But that's like because that's like what makes my music so vulnerable, I think. And when I was going through in 2017 is really when it started. I just felt so empty, like really, really so empty, and so disconnected from myself in such a profound way. Just felt like a zombie, like just like so afraid and hollow. And so I
Mm.
was writing about it. I've written quite a few songs about that topic, and it's really really beautiful for people to like reach out to me and say like, hey, I feel the same, because I know in my life when I talk about trauma, I don't necessarily mean like when people think of trauma, I think they think of like really horrific things, like abuse, like physical abuse, or like stuff like that. And that nothing like that has ever happened in my life. Like I had a very like safe, loving childhood and stuff like that. I think everyone um carries these wounds, these generational wounds, like you said, like that that have to come up at some point. And I've had a very visceral experience with that. I've had, you know, nights where I just like I remember one time I flew to New York with my manager to take some record label meetings, and I was just really on edge that day, and like being away from home like really triggered the hell out of me, and I just like had like a complete mental breakdown in the back of like this Uber on the way from the airport. And
Mm.
like you can ask my manager about it. It's like a very like it was like I was like psychotic. Like I was like whimpering, and like I was like when we got to the hotel, I was like on the floor of the bathroom, like it was very very vulnerable. And this was just trauma that I couldn't I was I'm so sensitive, and I think it had been so long, there was so much inside of me that I was just I didn't know what to do. I just fell apart basically. And I think a lot of people that are dealing with severe like mental illness or like any sort of stuff like that have we all have it. We all have it. And I think the people that are mentally ill, quote unquote, are just more sensitive. Like
Mm.
they're just more unable to not process that. They're just more sensitive. Because what I see in people, in the normal quote unquote people in society, is that they're not sensitive, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Like it's not good that you can't sit with your emotions, or that like you're able to like, you know, go out drinking every weekend to avoid like how you really feel or whatever. Like that's not like just because we live in a broken society, like the definition of normal is like actually like very repressed. That's not actually a good thing. So in a way, I'm glad that I'm sensitive, because it's opened me up to like a deeper level of love and understanding for myself. But yes, being a sensitive person, you sort of take on those deeper like energies that are bubbling up that the rest of the world might not be awakening to.
Yeah, or might not even be ready for, man, right? Like just I mean, I think that's why it's like people reach for a drink, or they reach for a joint, or they reach for, and not that there's like anything, I'm not like shaming any of those activities.
Yeah,
Like obviously,
right.
like, you know, people should do what they want to have a good
Yeah,
time and stuff.
absolutely.
But there's just a difference between doing that in an escapist way.
Yeah,
And and the ironic thing is I think you can turn anything into an escape. Like people do this
yeah,
with spirituality too. Like,
absolutely.
you know, like I like, and when I was just in Peru and doing the plant medicine, sometimes I did ayahuasca a year and a half ago, and I met people at that. I met a couple of people that were like, "Oh, this is like my 70th ayahuasca ceremony," and I was like, first of all, ayahuasca is like the shittiest experience ever,
Yeah,
pun intended.
yeah,
It's like the fucking worst
yeah,
experience. Like, why would you ever do that? But it's like that was I could see, and maybe I'm just projecting, but what
yeah,
I gathered was like this person is just like escaping through
yeah,
spirituality, you know. And this is why like even like cults happen are a thing, and like gurus get so much power and they can abuse people. And one thing that I, when I was last week when I was in Peru, we met a couple of tribes, like indigenous tribes that have literally been living the same way for like thousands of years in the
yeah.
Amazon. It was a beautiful, I mean, we were tripping balls at the time, but it was a beautiful experience. And the crazy thing was like, we took this psychedelic cactus, it's called huachuma. It
Okay.
has mescaline in it. And it's like a fucking, I don't know if you've ever done shrooms, but it's like basically like, it's like shrooms on shrooms for like
Okay.
16 hours. Like it's a super intense experience,
Okay.
but it just wakes you up, man. You know, and I'm not saying like, I know like I'm not saying everybody needs to do psychedelics. There's a lot of ways to become awake, but it's a tool. And like we went there, and the crazy thing was this tribe, when we were tripping, like at one point, my friend Amber came up to me and she's like, "Do you think they know that we're like tripping, or like, do you think they're like judging us? Cause like we're probably acting so weird." And I just had this deep knowing. And I was like, I think this is like how people are like supposed to, like, we're just like normal to them because we're like awake and we're not like run by our egos right now. And they told us that when somebody has a mental illness, traditionally in this tribe in Peru, if someone starts going psychotic, or what we would label as like bipolar or
Uh,
schizophrenic, they actually start to celebrate that person. they
Yeah.
start to revere that person and they consider that person a channel to God
Yeah.
because that person's awake and they're clearly getting some downloads that the rest of the village is not. And
Yeah.
that's how they deal with it. And then the mental illness goes away on its own
Yeah.
because of the way they treat it. They don't treat it like an illness. And I think it's a really it's a really powerful thing to think about, especially as musicians and artists, because you see like there's such a stigma in the music industry. And like unfortunately, I think largely because like we're not educated about this in the right
Yeah.
way by society, uh, it's so easy, I think, for artists to think that something is just like wrong with them.
Yeah.
And then that's why people get addicted and all this kind of stuff happens. So I think like to bring it back to this conversation and you, like, I think it's really interesting. And I'm curious, like, you said that you were going through this really tough time and you were feeling empty and hollow. And then you started really, it sounds like really radically changing your life around. And whether it was like through practices or meditation or whatever, can you talk a little bit, Anson, about like, because yeah, I mean, this is just so important. Like, can you talk a little bit about the order in which things unfolded? Because I think if you get what I'm saying, because I think sometimes people feel like, oh, that's like easy for him to say because like, you know, he's has all this like success, right? Like people might project that onto someone like you because like they see like whatever's happening.
Uh-huh.
But like from your perspective, like what was the order? Like did the success come first or was it like the
No.
change?
No, I mean, the change, quote unquote, was very, very gradual. And I'm still now still not. It's funny because the when you start doing work, you realize how much more work you have to do.
Right.
And I keep, the more I do this, it's called shadow work, really. Basically is like sort of just reintegrating all these feelings from your past. The more I do this, the more I just realize, like, how in God's name is there so much inside of me that I have not seen and felt and processed? But I mean, really, the order was okay. My shit fell apart. Like my life was like I was having like crippling anxiety all the time. Like I didn't want to leave my house. I couldn't drive anywhere because I was so panicked all the time. I was like, okay, I can't do anything. Like so, I think anyone that makes a significant change, they have to like a significant change in their life. They have to reach like this crisis point, right? Like that's usually, at least it's a good way to like uh, actually make some definitive change. So like obviously I started, not obviously, but I went to therapy and like I was meditating at the time, but I was really like, I started meditating to try and figure out what was bothering me so much because I had this intuition like, okay, I'm at the grocery store, I'm about to have a panic attack, but there's nothing wrong, you know, like clearly there's nothing wrong. So what is it
Right.
that's bubbling up in my subconscious that I can't be with? And so I would just sit at home and I would put myself mentally in the situations that would trigger me and I would try and sit with those feelings, which was very difficult at first because what I realized is I was extremely afraid of my own emotions, like extremely afraid of feeling fear, of feeling. Not only was I afraid, I was just completely unable to be with myself, completely dissociated from myself. Uh, uh, I had completely abandoned myself very early on in my childhood. I think my soul was like a catastrophe, so um, wounded,
Mm.
and so it was this very long process of reconnecting with myself. Like I want to emphasize, very, very long. And it's funny because you said like, yeah, you can become addicted to anything, and that's very true because at the time I've never been into like drugs or alcohol really. Like I occasionally drank in college, but I was medicating very heavily with food, and I think a lot of people medicate very heavily with food because it's so readily available and it's so culturally accepted. Um, I was like eating like 3 Chipotle bowls a day because I was just like living with my parents and I was just bored. So I just go to Chipotle because I was like so numb and like that's like I was just addicted to that. And then like I would, you know, just inch by inch at night try and meditate, sit with myself, see like why I was like feeling so empty or whatever. And it's like it's really been like this. I mean, recently now being here in California, even in the last 3 months, it's funny because like I've just been talking about this and doing this for so long, like telling people like my story and stuff. but I've really finally, it feels like, come up on some core wounds and really had some deeply painful moments like in therapy where I realized like, oh, this is what was missing, like this is what I was feeling, and this is that feeling in the cab that I was going psychotic about, that I didn't have the words for. And
Mm,
that's what I've realized is like people need the words for what they're feeling, and they need to say like, oh, I never felt seen in the way that I needed to. I never felt good enough. I
mm,
never felt like cared, like I never felt like I never felt love in my heart. Like people need to hear that. They need to say that, and they need to make a connection in their heart. Like, this is how I feel, and when you make that connection, you can move through that feeling.
mm,
But so many people just walk through the world with this vague feeling of unworthiness, like this uneasiness, and it's so unbelievably painful. And I don't think anyone really understands it until they've gotten very, very sober, which is what I've had to do. Like I said, I never had a problem with drugs or alcohol. um but when you really clean up your diet and you don't do anything, I don't play video games, I don't do anything, I eat fruits and vegetables and I go for walks. And when you do that and there's nothing else in your life except the feelings in your chest, they all come screaming up immediately. And it takes a very disciplined level of consciousness to be with those feelings and not go psychotic, because I know that humming energy in your chest will rip you open if you're not ready for
mm,
it. And so there, the order in which things unfolded was from the inside. It sounds so cheesy, right? Like, but it's like you have to make a change from the inside first, because I realized really early on that, like, if I was just like, oh, if I just work out more, like if I just switch my diet, like I'll feel better. I could feel really deep down there was something that needed to come out. Like there was something really that needed to be let go of. So I had this intuition very early on that there was no way of forcing it. And I also had an intuition very early on that I wasn't fucked up, like that, like there was nothing wrong with me. I knew I was just in on something that I didn't have the pleasure of avoiding like everybody else. So it was like this like very slow, delicate game of bringing it to the surface.
mm,
But the order, you can't force the order. What you can do is like have an intention to get better.
mm,
And but even that, and which is why this is like maybe the pinnacle of my spiritual understanding, is like you can't force anything of your own accord. You are always being brought to the exact moments you need, whatever your fragile little ego might think. Which is why even the idea of surrender, everyone talks about surrender, is a sham, because there's no one to surrender.
mm.
So it's like,
Well, man,
yeah, I don't know.
the ego is just so sneaky. It will literally co-opt
Yeah,
anything. Like it will, I mean, that's just what it's there to do. It will co-opt, and then all of a sudden you're like the guy who's really good at surrendering. You're like, I mean, like I like the first I went to a silent meditation retreat years ago when I was 24 or 25. And it was a 10-day silent retreat. It was my first time ever meditating. I just jumped right into the deep end. And I came back and like, dude, I would not shut the fuck up about meditation to everyone. I was like, to my
I'm
parents,
like, to be
I was like,
honest.
you know what you guys need? You need some meditation. Like, see, did you notice how you reacted to that situation? Because I noticed, and
Yeah,
I won't react that way because
yeah,
I have like, and it was just such a like, I look back and it's like, I can only look back on that former version of myself with compassion,
yeah,
obviously, because there's no use in like shaming it. But it's just funny how the ego will just literally corrupt anything that you
yeah,
try to get behind. And this thing that we keep dancing around, which is the only way to do it because it cannot be talked about, I think it can only really be experienced, of really seeing through the illusory nature of this constant sense of self.
yeah,
Like there's just nothing there. It's just a series of processes going on. And I think that is like just extremely confronting for most people to really be with, because
oh,
what does that say? Like, it's just like, it's very difficult to like really internalize the fact that there's just nothing in there. And
yeah,
it's just like, you're just being lived, you're just being blown by the
yes,
wind.
yes,
And and I think like even for people to, I think many of us, and I include myself in this, like it's just a constant work in progress, man. Like I'm, especially a lot of things you're talking about like feeling like there's just this thing inside of you. I feel that way a lot of the time still. Even though I've done a lot of work, I'm still like, it's like I'm carving a sculpture painstakingly, and I'm just like carving it and carving it, and I'll probably be carving it my whole life. And but I think a lot of people would, it's easier, that's the paradox. It's not actually easier, but it seems easier to just pretend like it's not there and sweep it under the rug and just kind of like go live around with this ambient level of distress and anxiety. Because to really face it, like you said, you have to come up against some really tragic things about yourself. And
Yeah.
what are you smiling about?
Well, it's funny because like, first of all, you don't have a choice. You will face it eventually, if in this
Correct.
lifetime or the next. Like
We're all going to the same
you'll
destination.
get there, trust me. And it's funny
Right.
because I have it feels like my entire life has been an attempt not to face it. And the potency and the reason people go psychotic is because, like, I think Rumi, or I don't know who said it, but somebody said like mystics and psychotics, they bathe in the same water, right? They like sort of dance in the same wind or whatever. It's true. Like if you're in my opinion, in my own experiences with mental health and stuff like that, a psychotic person or a bipolar person is someone who has deep, because when you meditate, you come in touch with the energy of your body, chi or whatever you want to call it, and I can feel it very viscerally. And when I have these episodes, I feel the energy in my body like trying to escape. It's called kundalini energy. So what I would say is like people having psychotic breaks or manic episodes are having some sort of kundalini experience which they don't know how to integrate fully because they're just not trained in that way, or like it's so intense. The reason I was smiling is because it's like playing with fire, like the like you were mentioning uh avoiding the feeling or whatever. It's I was smiling because first of all, if you can get through the emptiness, what you'll find is the most rapturous, uh unthinkable, perfect love you could ever hope for. It's like the only thing you could ever want, like an endless fountain of god of love, of bliss. Like it's, and I have gone there, and I feel like, for not to over exaggerate, but largely I have had that experience lift me up into the state I am now. Like I feel like I dwell in like a very constant state of like ecstasy in a way. Like I can feel it now, sort of just like humming through my heart. And it's so funny because I used to be complete atheist, um and now I'm very into like the Eastern teachings. And like I was just reading, like I don't know if you read like Autobiography of a Yogi, um but
That's a
like
great
in
one.
fact, Paramahansa Yogananda actually has an ashram, like or I don't know if it's called an ashram, but he has a temple here in LA.
Oh,
And
amazing.
actually he has a few temples here in LA. But anyways, I see all these quotes now, and they're like, you know, all these yogis talking about like how what you want is like the love of God. And like it sounds so cheesy, like for someone like living in like a secular world. Like I know, because I was that person that was just like obsessed with like money and fame and like whatever. But
Yep.
it is literally the truth. The only thing you want is this divine love, which is freely available, and it's the essence of all religions. It's why people say Jesus loves you unconditionally, because he does. And Jesus is just another name for like,
You. That's like, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I feel like I know what state you're talking about. I wouldn't say that I live there all the time, but, and it's funny, like, yeah, I love the way you said that it was like humming in your heart, because once you're familiar with it, you can just kind of like tune into it. It's just like fucking hilarious. Actually, I didn't tell you. So the name of this podcast is The Sacred Giggle.
okay,
And it's literally like a play on that, because
okay,
there's this concept in Buddhism called sacred laughter,
okay,
which is basically this idea that like when you just realize the cosmic joke of it
yeah,
all, and just like the absolute ludicrousness of ever suffering about anything
Uh-huh.
because it's all just fucking running through our fingers anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, it reminds me of a quote, Chogyam Trungpa, he's like a Tibetan Buddhist master. He said, the bad news is you're falling through the sky with no parachute. The good news is there's no ground.
Yeah.
And like, when you really just, it's just it's the same coin as just like the most terrible fear that you could like possibly imagine. And I think that's why it's like you have to go through that gate a lot of times for people. And that's why the rock bottom moment is so common, like in these kinds of stories you hear from people. But yeah, like that ability to tune into that, it renders the ability or the idea of even wanting anything so
No,
ludicrous.
it's
It's just
just
like, how, like I already am the thing that I want, you know, because you just feel so whole. And I think like this is why, dude, like I'm the same way, man. Like I was raised in a Hindu household. My parents are like Hindu, they're religious. And I used to just kind of like, you know, they would go to temple every month and I was just like going through the motions, whatever. Just because I was like a kid rebelling against my parents. But then like as I got older and started suffering, basically, like that's the key. And like realizing like, okay, fuck, like what is happening here? It's so humbling, man. And I understand why people are religious, because whatever you want to call it, the force of nature, God, whatever, there is this thing that's moving through. And if you can just like relax into it,
yeah.
it's a life changer. But that's the constant practice, man, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's definitely a practice. Like what's hilarious to me is like now talking, first of all, looking back at myself, like as an atheist, like back in high school, whatever, and like it's the idea that there's nothing pulling the strings here, that there's no higher intelligence involved in the universe, like, is so laughable and so obviously incorrect. Like, so, like, if I get a cut, it heals itself.
Right.
Flowers grow towards the sun.
Your
It's
heart is beating
it's
like
literally
on its own.
fucking obvious
Right.
that like there's something going on, whatever you want to call it. There's something keeping us all alive. I just like, it's hilarious to me that I personally ever thought that wasn't the case. Um, but yeah, it's I wanted to make another point. What were you saying? It's something um right before you
Just talking about relaxing into it.
into it. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is like, so like for all the progress that I've made, like I used to be so neurotic, and in many ways, actually, I'm still a bit neurotic. Um, but like I was so deeply self-critical and so judgmental of myself. People don't realize like it is a practice. Like it is a deep practice, becoming aware of every single time you say like, oh, I'm so stupid or whatever, like, oh, I can't believe I did this. Like, you have to be like, ah, another one, I just did it again. Like, the first step is just being aware that you're doing that. Like, you don't even have to change a thing, because my thing is like, okay, there's two levels to this. The reason you're having those thoughts is probably because of trauma, to be honest. Like, until you work through those deeper emotions and beliefs that are literally physically being held in your emotional body, it's very hard to transcend that negative self-thinking. Because what I found is the negative self-thinking is usually just a deeper level. It's like sort of a neurotic manifestation of some wound that hasn't been healed yet.
Mm.
But people don't understand like how important it is to check your thought patterns, because they don't realize they have literally just learned their thought patterns
And that's
from
what feels like them, right?
it's not real at all. It's
Yeah.
not, you don't have to be like that. And I am living proof that you can start to change very slowly. And in some of these deeply ingrained thought patterns, it takes a very long time.
Mm.
Uh but the other thing too is what's important is like I said, like if you do notice yourself being like, oh, I hate myself, like I am not good enough, whatever, don't just say like, ah, it's not true. I mean, do say that, but then you want to sit with that. What I try to do is like sit with that part of me that's like, you're not good enough. I like sort of let it talk. I'm like, okay, like tell me
Right.
more. Like, I'm not good enough. Like, like how's that make you feel? Like, what would tell me like why you feel that way? I like sort of dialogue with this wounded part with myself, and eventually, usually, if you dialogue with that wounded part of yourself, depending on how deep the level of pain is, and for most people it's very deep, so you probably won't have like a breakthrough the first time, but you can usually get to the core emotion there if you're
Mhm.
willing, and this is something I do in meditation actually when I'm having some sort of neurosis, is like I'll dialogue with that part of myself, or I'll hold space for that part of myself while I'm meditating and see what comes up. And that's an important part of like that practice too. But yeah, relaxing, always be relaxing. ABR. That's the name.
ABR. I love it. As ASMR ABR.
That's right. Always be
Always
relaxing.
be relaxing. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. I mean, yeah, I mean, I love the dialogue piece you just talked about. So in one of my Zen meditation teachers, he developed, well, he didn't develop, but he introduced me to this concept called voice dialogue. It's very similar to what you're saying, but it's basically like if you could imagine that your brain is like the UN, and every emotion and like sub egoic personality is like a country, and
Yeah.
there's like a panel of countries, they all have a microphone, but
Yeah.
you're the moderator,
Yeah.
and you get to say like, oh, and it's literally like, you know, if we were doing it, or it would be like, may I speak to the voice of Ashish's shame, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And then like I literally like close my eyes and like shake it up, and like I open my eyes and I'm like, hi, this is Ashish's shame. And then like you ask that version of that part of yourself, like, how are you feeling? Like, what would make your life easier? What can I do for you to make you? And it's just like creating that benevolent relationship with yourself. It's just, we're just so not like taught this. And
Oh,
you're right that it's a discipline. It's like you have to love yourself like your fucking life depends on it, man. Like it's just because it does. Like it's just it's such a discipline. And if you think about how hard people work, and I'm still just understanding this. Like my teacher told me, he was like, "You're such a hard worker. What if you took all of that work ethic and just poured it into not letting us, like exactly what you said, not letting a single disempowering thought go by. Just like stop doing everything else." But and I think this is why it's really inspiring to talk to you about this, because like you said, your own story is an example of that, of like just completely prioritizing that and trusting that everything else will fall into place. And it's hard for, I just think it's hard for people to do that because we're so used to only believing what's 3D here in front of our
yeah.
eyes.
Well, the other problem too is like when you come face to face with how truly unworthy you feel, like people don't understand the fabric of our entire culture is built on the idea that you are worth nothing unless you achieve everything, unless you become the richest, hottest person in the world. That is the only way. If you're the number one, then you are worth something. But otherwise, you're not worth it. There's always something better than you. When people, if people don't realize the like everything is energy, right? If you understood what this feeling was like in your body, to have been poisoned with this belief from the second you stepped on the earth, this idea, it's so pervasive in every single person and so unbelievably painful. Like I've had moments in meditation where I realized like I don't feel like I'm worth anything. Like I feel like a completely worthless person. I feel like no one loves me. I feel unlovable. I feel like I have nothing to offer. Like when you come face to face with that, it's so painful. Like people I mean just saying it, right? Sounds like how could you ever say that? Like you don't actually mean that. No, I do. Like I felt that before, and I think everyone feels it to a degree. Um
And the how could you possibly say that response, that knee-jerk reaction
yeah.
that people have, it's because deep down they know how difficult it would be to actually face that themselves. So it's
Yeah.
easier to just deny it. It's easier
Yeah,
to
well,
just be like, come on, Anson, like you don't mean that. Like
yeah,
it's the same as like telling a kid to stop crying, right? It's
right.
like,
Right.
don't cry. You know, there's nothing to be sad about.
Yeah, it's just like that's why it's so hard to be compassionate with yourself, is because from the moment you set foot on this earth, you don't have a chance, because unless you're Jesus Christ himself, no one is being kind in this world. And that's like honestly what I try to use my platform now about as a musician is like bro, stop being mean, like which sounds so oversimplified, but there's no kindness, there's no love in the world, because when you get a taste of it through these plant medicine experiences or through meditation or whatever, and you think, oh my God, this is the only thing I ever wanted. The only thing I ever wanted was to feel safe and to feel loved and to feel like I belong to something. This is the only thing I ever wanted. And then you look into the world, there's nothing. There's not a single shred of it. And even the religions are tying up little caveats and say, oh, you can have it as long as you say
Conditionality, yeah.
it's so painful, but it makes so much sense. It makes so
Yeah.
much sense why the world is so broken.
Yeah.
Because
And the
there's
and the
very no love in the world.
and the very idea of trying to look for it, like you have the experience, right? And then you're like, okay, like the moment you start looking for it outside of yourself, it's like you lost the plot already. Like it's so sneaky, you
Yeah.
know, like, and even people even do this with like a practice. Like I'm sure you've had the experience of like I'll have like a great meditation session and I'll be like, fuck yeah, like meditating's awesome. And then I'm like, I just delude myself like it's gonna be like that every time. And now I'm attaching the experience of universal loveness and unicity and the fact that your self-worth is not even questioned, it's a birthright of just being alive. Like I equate all of that to the activity of meditating.
Yeah.
And then that becomes its own fucking thing. Instead of
Yeah.
just being like, no, that was me.
Yeah.
Like that was happening inside of me, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes I get scared, like I don't do this as much anymore, but I've noticed along the path, like you sort of like you reach like these points of realization in your being, and like I'll get worried, like, oh, what if I can't like maintain this state of being, or like what if I can't? And I'm just like, oh, that's literally just my ego, like just like that's all it is. It's literally just thoughts. Like that
Right.
doesn't mean a goddamn thing. Like,
Right.
I don't know. It's just like, yeah, but
And I think in order to even have the space to have that process, that
yeah,
metacognitive internal process, you you need to be able to feel comfortable. A person needs to be able to feel safe and comfortable enough in the unknown, in the
yeah,
space of observing those thoughts, in order to not latch onto them. And I think that that's where trauma can be so tricky and
yeah,
pervasive, because people have these negative disempowering thoughts and they're so used to thinking them day after day, month after month, year after
yeah,
year, that it just feels like them.
yeah,
And if they were to stop thinking those thoughts, it's akin to like dying. It's like a death of the
for
old
sure.
self. And
Yeah,
people can't have a hard time doing that unless, you know, it just takes a lot of sensitivity and care and patience, I think, with yourself to
yeah,
be able to do that.
for sure. And like, it's so funny because like if you really wanted to cure someone very quickly, what you would do, and I'm not recommending this for anyone listening, like I'm just in my own experience, like the reason that fasting is so powerful and it's recommended by so many texts is because when you stop all sensory input to your body, especially food, which is probably the most primary, your everything will come to the surface energetically.
Mhm.
Um, it's only a matter of time. So any negative thought patterns that you have will begin manifesting themselves as the actual trauma that you endured. Um, and so if you really wanted to quote unquote cure somebody of their ego, whatever, I have long maintained and even seen in myself that fasting or like just put someone in a room and medically supervise them for and like I said, don't clip this and cancel me because I'm not saying you should actually do this. I'm just saying this is an interesting thought experiment. If you put someone in a room and killed all stimulus, well, they would probably go psychotic. Honestly, they probably wouldn't get better because the average person has no tool set to deal with
Mm.
the things they're feeling, and that's like part of the problem we were talking about. But yeah, fasting, very powerful tool. I've never fasted for too long. The longest I did was 3 days. That was actually probably 6 months ago, and that was tough. Like 3 days without food is really hard.
Yeah.
Um, I do like sort of intermittent fast occasionally. Um, the one thing I've noticed is like even just cleaning up your diet really acts as a fast. Like for example, like a flesh fast or something like that, which you stop eating meat for a week or something like that. You like, and by the way, I'm not endorsing a certain diet. I think everybody needs to eat a different, like whatever your body wants. But um, that's just one thing I've noticed is like when you mention like people are like so stuck in these thought patterns, people don't realize how numb they have become to themselves. Like you cannot even begin to imagine. That's why it's called waking up. Is
Right.
like when this process starts, it will blow you away. It will rip to shreds the ideas you had about yourself and the world
Mhm.
if you're not ready for it. But yeah, it's crazy how obsessed with people's own thoughts they are. It's really crazy when you start to wake yourself and realize like, oh, holy shit, I was just like, none of that shit is real. The only thing that real is right now. That's it. It's happening all the time, and
Yeah.
I'm missing it. I keep missing it because I don't know, because I'm playing this stupid game with myself.
Right, dude. I mean, it is the biggest addiction on earth is to thinking. And it's like, Sam, I'm sure you're familiar with Sam Harris. Like, I think we talked about fasting like years ago. I remember like we were talking about it, I think, about something, but I've also never done longer than 3 days. I want to do 5 at some point.
Yeah, man.
But Sam Harris was saying, like if everybody were to walk around, like openly narrating the conversation that they're having in their head. I don't know if you've heard this, if that's what you're smiling.
I
Like,
think I've heard this.
yeah, like everybody would be psychotic. Like if you were the only one that didn't get the memo and you walked outside and everybody's just like talking about what's going on in their head, you would think the world had gone crazy. But that's literally, and it has.
I mean, look at the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the. It reminds me of an Alan Watts quote. He said, "When I look in the mirror, only less than 1% of me knows who Alan Watts is. Like less than 1% of the person looking back at me actually knows who Alan Watts is. It's like your left toenail is just growing. Like it doesn't give a fuck about like your name. Like, it's like, or your heart is just like beating. And man, dude, it's like the greatest battle of our lives. Like to like not succumb to that because we're just surrounded by it,
Yeah, it's crazy. And what I've been thinking about so much recently is how disconnected from like nature humans are, and like how like it makes perfect sense actually why human beings are completely neurotic and completely unable to be with themselves, because we've constructed a world and a society and a game that is so useless in fulfilling the basic needs of human beings, which is like, just like to feel connected with the earth and with other people, and to feel like we are literally animals, bro. Like we are not. Like, you can dress us up as much as you want with fancy cars and jewelry and clothes, but we are animals and we need the earth to survive. And everything we do, it sounds like some hippy dippy bullshit, but it's true, because you get to a point and you realize it's true. Like what you need: clean air, you need water, you need the sun. Okay, you need like in all the things we have come from the earth. Everything we have comes from the earth. But for some reason, we decided that it's better to build these metal boxes and like these screens, and like it's so obvious why everyone is so neurotic, because like we have no connection with life itself. Like the earth is literally the source of our life. We owe everything. We would not exist without the earth mother, like we just have no chance. Like, which is why these aboriginal tribes that you hung out with are deeply fulfilled. It's because they are one with what is sustaining them, and they have a respect for it, and they have a respect for each other. But here in America, we don't give a shit about that. All we care about is getting enough Instagram likes and Twitter followers, which is useless, which doesn't mean anything. It has no fulfillment. But that's one thing I've been thinking about, is like our world as humans now is so like the chips are so stacked, or the cards are so stacked against us, or the deck is so stacked against us rather, in terms of finding this fulfillment. The reason we're so neurotic, right? It's like broken people are a symptom of a broken society, right? It's not just an accident that everyone's suddenly completely neurotic. This has been going on for a while, and even Ram Dass, like I don't know if you follow his work at all, but like
yeah,
he was like giving like talks on this in like the 60s, right? Like it's like, dude, he was like, the game's up. Like Alan Watts said the same thing, like the game's up. This is the 60s. That's like 80 years ago or something. Like, wait, is that 80 years ago? Whatever.
That is
but
fucking. It's like fucking 50 years ago.
so
No,
long
what?
ago,
7
right?
years
Like,
ago.
and they could see it then, right? And I bet even 100 years before that, you could see it then. It's like, where's this game even going? I was thinking about the other day. I was like, okay, what is like this? What is like the materialist paradigm? Like, where is it going? It's so obviously a sham.
Yeah.
Like, where does the fulfillment come from in like just a purely materialist paradigm?
I think we're just trying to distract ourselves for a long enough time, like before we die. We're just like so scared of death. Like it's just like, okay, just anything to like not think about my impending doom. Like I mean that's the thing with these tribes, man. Like, man, it was crazy. You would like yeah, I mean, it was like the other thing they were talking about was like when you die, it's a for them it's like a celebration, because you die and you're it's like a thank you to the earth.
Right.
you're contributing. You're like, I'm giving my body back to the earth so that the soil can feed on it and it can then preserve more life. And it's like, because there isn't that fundamental identification with the body, it's like, no, I'm just like a soul. Like, I'm going to keep doing my thing. Like, but I'm giving this self back. But I think people are so that, I mean, man, I talk a lot about death on my Instagram actually, because I just think, I know it's not like good content or whatever, but I'm like, yo, people need to think about their death, like their mortality. It's so important. And sometimes people are like, man, like sometimes like, it's so dark or deep. I'm like, yo, like that's the content I'm giving you. Like, if you want, like love and light, I do the love and light thing too, but I'm not going to exclusively just do love and light. Like, if you want that, like, there's a million like yoga pages and stuff, but it's like, because I think it's just so important. It's such a beautiful ally. Like, it's just, I don't know if you're into like stoicism at all, but like it's like a huge part of stoicism is like, if this was your last action on earth, like how would you perform it? Or like, what would you do if this is your last day? And it just has a way of like just making a complete and absolute mockery of like all the things that we hold so dear or freak out about.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned stoicism because it's like, what is it, memento mori or whatever? That's like,
yeah.
I tend to sort of roll my eyes when people like say that, because to me that's like sort of just like, why? Like, it's like, again, it feels like you're taking yourself too seriously. It's like, because if you embrace the complete absurdity, the complete nothingness, it's like, it doesn't matter if you live a day or 100 years. It's
Right.
all it's just a flicker in the universe. It's nothing. It's less than nothing. It's like your life literally means nothing. It literally means this sounds okay. Someone's gonna clip this.
I love this. No, but what's amazing? Like, what you're saying content wise could sound like nihilistic or whatever, but it's like the energy with which you're saying it is like embodying what this whole podcast is about. But anyway, continue.
Think about it. Like, if you died tomorrow, or if you lived 50 more years and had a beautiful life, it doesn't matter. Like, the idea that I need to squeeze every moment of meaning out of my life before it's over is completely egoic, and it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. It's funny as I say that, but yesterday I was thinking to myself, I feel like there's levels to the game, and you can recognize that on one level, and still like sort of be back in your humble ego mind, like, being appreciative from like the more human level. Like, you probably don't want to be like blissed out all the time, completely absorbed in the God mind, just like not giving a shit about anything, whatever. But like the one thing, to your point, which I was thinking about yesterday, is like, and this happens as you become more and more conscious, you realize the unthinkable, miraculous nature of life itself, of consciousness itself, the one mystery that no one has any explanation for. And Deepak Chopra just had a quote I read recently that was like, if every moment is not a miracle, then there are no miracles. And it's so true, because like, this is another thing that the scientific materialist paradigm has sort of unfortunately done to a lot of people, is it has completely robbed them of the magic of life. The idea that your heart is beating, that we are having a conversation, that anything should be happening at all, is so utterly impossible.
Yeah.
In spite of it, it is happening.
Right.
If you could truly grasp the depth of this revelation, your life would become so blissful and amazing, because you would have no choice but to just revel in the rapture, for lack of a better word, of experience itself. But instead we've been indoctrinated with all these fear beliefs, and like, oh, I'm afraid, I need a job, I need a
purpose. Yeah. Well, so sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I was just thinking about that the other day, and I sort of regularly will have these moments like, how the fuck am I alive? Like, what the, like, how is that even possible? Like
totally, man. Yeah.
Like, I'm looking at myself like, what is this? Like, what's going on? Like, and it used to scare me, but now it's just like, okay, I guess we're just gonna keep going. Like, something brought me here. It's gonna keep taking me where I need to go.
It's utterly hilarious, and that's again why I named this podcast what I named it. Like, it's just that's the okay. So let me ask you a question now. This is a loaded question, but like, I think you'll get where I'm going with this. Why do you make music?
I don't know. It's like, I like it. It brings me joy. That's
amazing. Because so the reason I asked that, and I thought I was expecting like that would you answer it that way. Like so many people, again, this is like another thing. Like, and I actually only recently kind of dismantled this in my own head and realized that it's like bullshit and doesn't matter. Legacy. People are like, I want to like, make timeless music. I'm like, and I was that guy for a long time, actually. Like I had all these like grand ideas. And like, of course, that would be nice, but like all those people are also gonna fucking die. Like it's like
Exactly,
it
bro.
doesn't fucking matter. Like, yeah, it's just like it so doesn't matter. And I just realized like I actually don't give a fuck about the only reason I care about my legacy is insofar as like if my existence can help like other people be more free
Yes.
while they're existing, that would be great. But like I don't need people. I'm not even gonna be there. My ego is gonna be dead. So I can't even enjoy the fact that people are like singing my praises when I'm gone anyway. But like I was thinking about that, and I love your answer because it just goes back to like, am I just enjoying this life? Because even the fact that we can have this conversation is a privilege. Like it's like compared to a lot of people on earth, and like even that whole paradigm, I think it's so easy to go into shame there and be like, well, you should feel lucky, blah blah blah. And it's like, no, because like actually like a lot of those people are super happy because they don't even like ask these fucking questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms. It's like, okay, yeah, America, we're the greatest, right?
Right.
Like, but like everyone's depressed. Like literally every single person is depressed and
Right.
anxious and neurotic out of their minds. And then you go to like you said, Peru, and it's like they're taking siestas and like,
Right.
sure they don't make $50,000 a year, but they actually like have a sense of wholeness.
Yeah.
They're
They're
not
just
comparing themselves to like other people on Instagram.
right. They're just like chilling. And I think like, you know, I do think like we're human. I mean, this is one thing I've also been thinking about a lot. Like we're human beings, right? Like we're not, we're all going there. We're all getting there anyway. Like at the end of the day, we're all going to get to that place. It's like, there's no rush. So it's like, if while we're here, yeah, let's do the whole human thing. Like let's have relationships and get our heart broken and like, make bad decisions and make good decisions and learn and grow and everything. But just let's just remember that it's a fucking video game. Like it's not like, it's just like amazing graphics. Like I can like literally touch all of it. Like I can, if there's any object I pick up, it just interacts with me. Like it's more realistic than anything. Like, but it's just a game, right? And I think quote from Aubrey Marcus, which I love. Shout out Aubrey Marcus, inspired me to start this podcast. But he said, like, you can tell the sound. You can tell the sound of a spiritual leader by the sound of their laughter.
Yeah,
like
sure.
If somebody's not fucking laughing and just like in awe of the ridiculousness, like don't trust that. Don't take spiritual advice from that person because they're taking shit way too seriously.
Yeah. That's so true, dude. I was just watching. I don't know if you watch like the actualized.org clips ever on YouTube.
No, I will after this though.
Leo, I think is his name. He's got, dude, he goes crazy. I mean, he does like a lot of psychedelics too, but he's like a really experienced meditator and like just like always posting like these really meaty videos, like 3 hours long, like in-depth explanation of God realization and all this stuff. It's just like it's quite profound. And I was watching one of his videos that was like it was like an in-depth explanation of God realization, and he was like explaining basically how he had come to this point. Like I think it was actually on a psychedelic trip where like he realized he was God, and like he and obviously like this is like impossible to actually put into words, like to so that someone would understand it, but he had this experience of like seeing like life from the perspective of every being that's ever lived, and like every memory he's ever had, he realized he constructed it for the sake of like just playing God, and like he saw like every possible reality, and like I just thought it was an interesting way. But he was basically explaining like the point of life is like you as God designed reality to like sort of, and I've heard this explained before, like sort of wake up slowly to the fact that you are God, but be so convinced in the realness of the reality that it would feel like a game, right? Because if you already had the potential to do everything, it would get kind of boring after a while. And I think
it's like a cheat code.
Yeah, it's like it's an interesting way to live your life, and it's something that I've sort of been experiencing with. It's like really embracing like this magical way of thinking, and like really embracing like my godness, and like seeing what I can really Cause like, dude, I'm like super ambitious. Like, I want to take this like all the way. Like, I like have some very, very ambitious goals to achieve. And I think the more you wake up in consciousness and the more you like draw back those limiting beliefs and stuff, it's just fun for me to like sort of just play life like a game and like see like, okay, like what really, how far could this thing really go? Like, if I really didn't have like any expectations for who I should be, what I can accomplish, like that's the wave I'm on right now. It's like Russ talks about, like, I don't know if you follow
Yeah.
Russ. He
Yeah.
talks about like delusional self-confidence.
Yep.
And that, man, that is so true. And it's so what got me to where I am, is like just this murder level belief that you can do the thing you want, and that it is coming to you no matter what. You know, they say like, you know, ask and it is given or whatever. Like, you gotta put it to the test. Like, what else is like the point? You know, you might as well try
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Like, what else can I create? Totally, man. And I think like, okay, so here's a question on that. Like, what would you say? Like, I'm guessing, you know, because like I'm guessing, and let me know if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that with the physical hologram projecting back to the
Yeah.
fruits of that kind of thinking
Uh-huh.
in the way of, you know, material success that you've been having, I'm guessing that that just adds to the fire, right? And it becomes this like this upward
Oh,
cycle.
oh yeah.
So but let's, I want to take it back, like for somebody who's in a position where they're like just starting out, let's say, and they're
Uh-huh.
like listening to this podcast, and then maybe they're like a huge fan of yours, and they're like,
Yeah.
damn, this is super inspiring, but like I just don't have that delusional confidence, and like
Yeah.
maybe when I try, I feel like I'm lying to myself, and I just
Yeah.
like, I don't like, what would you say to that person? Like, I know you like it's advice, but like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
what would you say?
you got to start small, I think. Well, actually, you don't have to start small, so don't take that advice. I mean, you can start big. You can start right now, and that's the thing, is like people don't realize, in terms of manifesting, it takes the same amount of effort to manifest $10 as it does to manifest $10 million. The problem is, uh, there is so much, like I said, fear in our culture, and you have been so programmed egoically to believe that the only way you would ever make $10 million is by some miracle. And you specifically could never do it because that's something for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And but you get to a point in meditation, in consciousness, when you realize that these are just thoughts, they're just ideas, they have no bearing on reality. But what I would really say is, like, you have to try it out for yourself. Like, this is why I know it works, is because I've seen it. I've literally gone from like $0 in my bank account to like having enough money, like, to where I can live comfortably, like, just purely like. And I would do all the exercises. I would think about like money showering me. Like, I would think about, like, I would look at nice cars and I think like, oh, I can afford that car. Like, I can, like, I just would steep myself in wealth consciousness. And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
like, money is just like an example, and I'm not like trying to flex and say like I have like $1 billion or whatever, but that's just like an example for someone that's listening. um I would say, like, just try it for yourself. Like, for example, like Abraham Hicks. I really, really like the Abraham Hicks books. Ask and It Is Given is a book
Yep.
that they put out, and all of them are really good, honestly. And it sounds, this is what I'm going to say, is like, you have to silence your rational, skeptical mind. Okay, you have to do it, and just try.
Yeah.
Okay, just try it.
And if you're having difficulty silencing the rational mind, I would just say, how has that been working out
Right,
so
exactly.
far?
It's like, are you
Right.
generating the results you want? If
Right.
not, no. And also, what you need to do, this is so important. Look at the people you want to be like. Don't take advice from people that haven't generated the results you want. Like, don't listen to your broke friend who works a job that he doesn't like, and say like, oh, that'll never work. Like, how's that working for him? Not
Mm.
that great. Like, so you have to go to people that you respect and look up to and ask them. And obviously everyone's going to give a different answer, right? Like, some people are going to say like, oh, like, work really hard. But I'm not saying you don't have to work really hard for like, for example, for money. For example, like, I'm not saying money will just fall in your lap, like $1 million tomorrow. What I am saying is, the more aligned you become with your higher self, and the more you aligned you become with those beliefs, uh, life will unfold in a way that would bring that to you, symbiotically.
Mm.
And so it didn't even feel like hard work. Like, my journey up to this point, none of it has felt difficult or hard, because I've been sort of going in the direction that I feel called. But anyways, yeah. So the Hicks books are really good. it's very, very important that you do the emotional trauma work, because you will never manifest the things you want if you feel unworthy about yourself or if you feel like you don't deserve them. Uh, Lacey Phillips, I think, has a podcast called gosh, I just started listening to it. I think that's her name. I heard about her on the Luke Story podcast. I don't know if you listen to Luke Story's podcast.
Yeah, yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Uh, she has like a whole thing about manifestation, which I really like, and it's very, very important because a lot of people, what they do when they're trying to manifest something is they're just like, and I fall into this trap too. Is like, okay, I want to manifest being like the number one Spotify artist in the world or something, and then when I like the degree to which you need something in your life is the degree to which it will not come to you. So if you really need to feel famous or to feel rich because of a sense of lack, you'll
Yep.
never get it. You'll never, ever, ever, ever get it. But the moment that you heal those wounds and connect with that higher power and feel worthy, that's when all the good stuff starts flowing into your life.
Mm.
So I would say do that emotional work. There's books, like I said, I'll just list a few books that I really like. There's one called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, which is very, very good. One I tell everyone else to read, excuse me, is Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. That book is amazing, amazing, amazing. Tara Brach is one of the people that completely changed my lives, and I heard about her on Tim Ferriss' podcast. Like I said, all the Abraham Hicks books are amazing. As a Man Thinketh, I need to go back and reread that one again because that one's a real banger too. But yeah, just like it's like you said, like it's like has what you've been doing, like has what you're doing like been working? Has it been generating the results? Like no, if not, like just be willing to try something. And the problem is, I think people like, especially with manifesting and stuff, like if they don't get like $1 million tomorrow, like you got to understand, like if it is true that everything in your life right now is the product of everything you've been thinking since you were born,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna take some time to like to rearrange the outer circumstances. Like
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, like it's gonna take significant time and sustained effort in changing the way you think. So
Yeah.
don't be upset if it doesn't work like in the
Oh
way
man.
you want it.
So many gems there, dude. Like especially the piece about like not bypassing the shadow work phase.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's kind of like this metaphor of when you're a caterpillar. when remember when you were a caterpillar, like we all have that memory. Like,
Yeah.
but like a caterpillar, uh, before turning into a butterfly, it fucking dissolves into goo. Like it literally like just completely like loses everything. And I think in self-development and manifestation, something I see a lot, and I've also fallen in this trap, people try to bypass the goo stage and go straight to the butterfly.
Yeah.
And then they're just like a fucking like really beefed up caterpillar because they like went to the gym,
Analogy.
but they're not actually a butterfly yet because they didn't fucking go through the goo. And
Yeah.
like I think that's such an and nobody wants to talk about the goo. It's not celebrated, it's not sexy, it's nobody's gonna post it on their Instagram about it. Like so it's like, but that's what we have to do. And that, like you said, like if you don't do that, if you're in the energy of wanting something and you're not, rather than being the energy of deserving it, or maybe better yet, already having it, you're just going to manifest more situations of you wanting that thing. You're not actually going to manifest the thing itself. And there's a great exercise that I did. I do every year, actually, at the beginning of the year, where I write down, and I got this from Aubrey Marcus, again, shout out Aubrey Marcus, but I write down what my perfect day would look like in a paragraph. So I just like take like half an hour and I just write down, and I write it in the past tense. So instead of being like, oh, my perfect day would be like, if I had this, then I would be blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, today was the best day ever. Like you write it as if you're about to fall asleep, ever having the best day ever. And you're like, I woke up, like this amazing thing happened. Then like, you know, like my beautiful partner, who's like the partner of my dreams, like came and gave me a kiss, whatever it is. And like, you just like write this whole thing. And dude, I'm just going to end this with this. Like I wrote it at the beginning of 2020 before all this shit happened. And then like the shit hit the fan, whatever. But I had a day at the end of the year that was like, I would say like 85. It was basically what that day was. And I learned two lessons from that. One, I needed to be more specific. Like I wrote down some general things. I was like, oh, I have a residency at a club in Tulum, got the residency. Like it was like literally that happened, but it wasn't like the dopest club. And I was like, I should have wrote like this specific name of this club. And then the other lesson I learned was just think bigger. Like just think way bigger. Like
Yes.
dream way bigger. Cause everything happened, dude. Like everything happened. It's like everything that I write down, it happens. And then I'm like, fuck, that could have been like 10 times bigger. Why didn't I just write it down? Like, but that's where the shadow work comes in. The reason I didn't was my own limiting belief, like that's what you have to work through.
Yeah. I did the exact same thing like three or 4 years ago. I heard a podcast and I think it was actually Tim Ferriss, and he was saying like this woman on the podcast, I can't remember who it was, but she was saying she had all her students like just write down basically that. It was like a journal entry in like your dream life or whatever. And I remember at the time I had been reading this book called Inside the Hit Machine by John Seabrook, and it's about like the pop music industry and how like there's a lot about like people like Benny Blanco and like Dr. Luke and Max Martin and these juggernauts in like in the industry or whatever. And I remember in the book he talks about like how he went to like Benny Blanco's studio, and it's like this house in Malibu, and it's like they're just like on the ocean like making like pop music. And like so I was like in that headspace and like just like thinking like, okay, this is what I want for my life. I want to be like a record producer. I want to like California. It's crazy, man, because like that was like 3 or 4 years ago, and now I live like in this beautiful home and like right like next to the ocean. Like I'm making music for a living. So many things I can look back on my life and say like for example, Welcome to Wonderland, this song I wrote. I remember when that song came out in 2018, I had an intention, a very clear intention for that song to do 100 million streams on Spotify. And I had no reason to believe, absolutely no reason to believe that would ever happen, because at the time it had 100,000 streams, still respectable for an artist.
Yeah.
Dude, that song's gonna hit 100 million streams, and like, and like, it's so true, man. Like people don't understand your intention is everything, and if you will just put things out there and say this is what I want to happen, and I'm open to it happening, and I believe that it can happen, you will be blown away. At it might not happen exactly the way you want it, but it is shocking how much just intending for something to happen and believing it and allowing it to happen, like everything in my life that I've wanted to happen has happened in some way or another. And that's why I'm so intentional now. Just like, okay, I'm gonna have platinum records. I don't know how it's gonna happen. I'm gonna be on the radio. I'm gonna be and like I believe it, and it's like it's a process too, right? Because like maybe you do have to start small. Like maybe you really do have to say like, okay, I'm gonna make an extra $200 this month or something, and you're not sure how it's happened, but you believe that can happen, and then it does happen somehow. And then like maybe you do have to work your way up, but you get to a certain point where you realize it doesn't fucking matter. Like these are just like little human games you're playing in your mind. Like yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's where the grace comes in. Like the grace with yourself it goes full circle to how we started this whole conversation about it's not you doing it. Like it's like there's something else. Like, and so that's where you can be kind with yourself and be like, you look back and you're like, oh, I could have thought bigger. It's like, well, I didn't, and actually I couldn't have, because that was like exactly how I was thinking and how I needed to be thinking. And I'm sure now, like for yourself, like you're thinking way bigger now. Like it's just like an upward spiral, So, dude, Anson, man, we're like almost at 2 hours. I mean,
I know. I was like,
I feel like we could just like go forever.
Really go for a long time. I could go for a long time.
Yeah, man. But I just want to say, well, before we wrap this up, there's one more question that I ask all my guests, which is you, because you're the only guest so far. But I will ask all my guests it, which I feel like we've already talked about a bunch in this podcast. But the question is, what makes you feel the most free?
Oh gosh, I want to give a good answer. I don't know. I guess you could say God or love, or like just the presence. Like it just when you really connect with that stillness inside of you, it's perfect. It's just stunning, and it is the definition of freedom, because it's beyond any description or label. It's just what is, and that is pure freedom. It's just being. So yeah, that's what makes me free.
I love it, man. Yeah, I guess there's no you to feel it at that point.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, Anson, dude, this is amazing. I love you, man. I'm so proud of you. And I just can't wait to see what you do, and we're definitely gonna have to continue this for a part 2 at some point. But yeah,
Easy.
thanks for coming on the show.